The air bites, December's cold already a numb ache on your cheeks. You're stuck in rush hour, the rhythmic thrum of tires on steel your only companion as you crawl across the Silver Bridge, high above the Ohio River. Ahead, taillights blur into a single crimson ribbon. You glance at the clock on your dashboard, 4:58 p.m., Friday, December 15, 1967. A typical afternoon, except for the strange metallic groan that just ripped through the cold air. Then an unimaginable sound, a shriek of tortured metal, impossibly loud, followed by a series of cracks like thunderclaps directly overhead. The car in front of you lurches, not forward, but down. Instinct screams, your hands grip the wheel, but it's too late. The bridge deck beneath your tires buckles, a horrific wave of concrete and twisted steel rising and falling, a monstrous serpent collapsing in on itself. The world tilts violently. The headlights of oncoming traffic are suddenly below you, then gone. The steel girders, the cables, the very road you were on, all disintegrate into a maelstrom of concrete dust and roaring water. You're falling, engulfed in an impossible chaos of sound and motion, hurtling towards the icy blackness of the Ohio River below. You see a flash, a glint of something massive, dark and winged against the darkening sky, just before the water swallows everything. What did you just see? But to understand how we got here, how a routine commute could transform into such unimaginable horror, we need to go back. Before the screams, before the impossible sight of a bridge tearing itself apart, there was Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This was a town carved out of the rugged Appalachian landscape, nestled at the confluence of the Ohio and Kanawha rivers. Its people were resilient, hardworking, and deeply rooted in their community. Life here moved at a different pace in the mid-1960s. Front porches were for gossiping, main streets for parades, and the local football team was the talk of the town. Families gathered for Sunday dinners, kids played in the autumn leaves, and the biggest concern was usually the price of coal or the next river flood. The Silver Bridge, a marvel of engineering when it was completed in 1928, was not just a conduit for commerce, but a vital artery connecting Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio. It was a daily fixture, a symbol of progress and connection, crossed by thousands of residents every single day without a second thought. Nobody imagined this metallic behemoth, a feat of modern design for its time, could harbor a fatal flaw, nor could they have conceived that their quaint river town was about to become the epicenter of an unsettling saga that would blend engineering tragedy with something far more inexplicable. Their lives, seemingly ordinary, were about to be thrust into a chilling narrative that defied logical explanation. The year was 1966, and Point Pleasant, a town with a population just shy of 5,000, hummed with the predictable rhythms of small-town America. This was the heart of Mason County, West Virginia, a place where local gossip traveled faster than the morning paper, and everyone knew everyone else's business. The shadow of the Vietnam War was distant but growing, yet daily life revolved around the local industries, family, and faith. The Silver Bridge itself was an impressive structure, built using innovative high-strength steel eyeball chains rather than traditional wire cables. This allowed for a slender, elegant design that stretched 700 feet across the Ohio River, minimizing the need for piers in the navigation channel. At its opening in 1928, it was the first of its kind in the United States, hailed as a marvel. 40 years later, it carried U.S. Route 35 and processed an average of 4,000 vehicles daily, far more than its original design capacity, but it had always held up. The community relied heavily on it for commuting to jobs, accessing medical care, and connecting with neighboring communities. No one then, gazing at its sleek, silver lines, could have foreseen that this engineering achievement would become entangled with a local legend of terrifying proportions, nor that its structural integrity was slowly, imperceptibly, being compromised in a way that would lead to disaster. The stage was set not just for a bridge collapse, but for a story that would defy the boundaries of science and folklore. The tranquility of Point Pleasant began to fracture on the night of November 12, 1966. Four young people, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallette, were driving past an abandoned TNT plant, a relic from World War II, few miles outside town. It was late and the atmosphere was already a little eerie. They spotted what they first assumed were two large red lights in the shadows. As they slowed, those lights resolved into glowing, fiery eyes, belonging to something impossibly tall and dark, standing silhouetted against the night sky. The creature was estimated to be 6 to 7 feet tall, with immense wings folded against its back, described as resembling a man-sized bird with red eyes. Panic erupted in the car. Roger Scarberry slammed the accelerator, speeding away, only for the creature to reportedly launch itself into the air and pursue them. It kept pace with their car, flying silently above them, an unnerving, winged shadow against the moon. They drove back to town in a frenzy, bursting into the Mason County Sheriff's Office, eyes wide with terror, insisting they had encountered something otherworldly. Sheriff George Johnson, a man of practical mind, listened patiently but dismissively. Teenagers late at night in a desolate area, it was an easy story to wave off as a prank, a misidentification, or perhaps even a shared hallucination. But their terror was undeniably real. The first seed of dread had been planted, dismissed by authority, but destined to sprout into something far more pervasive and disturbing, a warning that no one yet knew how to heed. The Scarberry Mallet sighting wasn't an isolated incident for long. Within days, more reports began to flood the Mason County Sheriff's Office. On November 15, Mrs. Marcella Bennett, her baby daughter Tina, and her friends Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Thomas were driving to visit the Scarberrys near the old TNT plant. As they passed the entrance to an abandoned bunker, a large, grayish-brown creature, described as taller than a man, with huge wings and glowing red eyes, emerged from the darkness. It shuffled towards them, blocking their exit. Mrs. Bennett froze in terror, paralyzed as the creature lurched closer to their car. The specific detail that makes the stomach drop here is her profound maternal instinct overwhelmed by primal fear. She felt utterly helpless to protect her child. They barely escaped, speeding away as the creature reportedly chased them for a short distance. This wasn't a teenage prank. These were credible adults, deeply shaken by what they had seen. Local media, initially hesitant, soon picked up on the unfolding mystery. The Point Pleasant Register published a front-page story on November 16, dubbing the creature the Mothman, a name that would quickly capture the public imagination. Skepticism remained strong among many, but the sheer volume and consistency of the sightings, all centered around the desolate TNT plant and the surrounding areas, made it increasingly difficult to dismiss. Fear, a cold, creeping thing, was beginning to settle over Point Pleasant, whispered in homes and openly discussed in the diner. The creature's appearance was far too consistent, far too terrifying, to be easily rationalized away, hinting that something far more unsettling was taking root in their quiet town. As the Mothman sightings escalated through late 1966 and into 1967, so too did the strangeness surrounding Point Pleasant. The creature was reportedly seen by hundreds of people, sometimes in small groups, sometimes individually, always instilling profound terror. But a second wave of inexplicable phenomena began to emerge, adding an entirely new, deeply unsettling layer to the mystery. Locals started reporting encounters with mysterious figures, often described as men in black or MIBs. These individuals, always dressed in dark, ill-fitting suits, would arrive in black Cadillacs or unmarked cars, asking intrusive questions about the Mothman sightings. They seemed to know details about witnesses' lives that shouldn't have been public, speaking in an oddly flat, almost robotic monotone, and warning people against discussing their experiences further. One prominent case involved local resident Mary Heyer, a columnist for the Athens Messenger and Point Pleasant Register, who collected many of the Mothman reports. She described receiving strange phone calls and visits from these peculiar individuals, leaving her deeply unnerved. These weren't federal agents, their demeanor was too strange, their inquiries too pointedly bizarre. Something didn't add up. Why were these enigmatic figures so invested in suppressing information about a local cryptid? Their presence hinted at a deeper, more coordinated effort to obscure the truth, raising the terrifying possibility that the Mothman wasn't just an unexplained beast, but a signal, or perhaps a pawn, in a much larger, more sinister game playing out in the quiet streets of Point Pleasant. For months, the unfolding drama in Point Pleasant focused almost entirely on the supernatural, the Mothman, the men in black, and the escalating fear in the community. Everyone was looking up, scanning the skies, searching for answers in the shadows and the unexplained. Everything pointed one way, towards a cryptid mystery of unparalleled strangeness. But then the unthinkable happened. On December 15, 1967, at 4:58 p.m., the Silver Bridge, that elegant, sturdy connection between West Virginia and Ohio, failed catastrophically. The sudden, violent collapse, without warning, redirected the narrative entirely. 46 people lost their lives, plunging into the freezing waters of the Ohio River. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on winged creatures or mysterious men, but on the cold, hard mechanics of engineering failure. How could a bridge, a symbol of stability and progress, simply give way? The sheer scale of the human tragedy overshadowed all previous concerns. But for those who had been living through the Mothman hysteria, the timing was too precise, too chillingly synchronous to be mere coincidence. The Mothman sightings, the strange phone calls, the ominous sense of dread that had permeated the town for over a year, they were no longer just bizarre local folklore. They became, for many, a dire, if misunderstood, warning. A warning about an impending disaster that no one in authority had taken seriously enough, perhaps because the signs came not in blueprints or structural reports, but in the terrifying, unexplainable encounters with a creature from the darkness. The question shifted from what is the Mothman to was the Mothman trying to tell us something? What the bridge collapse revealed was a critical, long-overlooked flaw in its very design and construction. The Silver Bridge was a groundbreaking structure, but its innovative use of I-bar chains was also its Achilles heel. Unlike traditional suspension bridges that use multiple redundant wire cables, the Silver Bridge utilized a series of linked steel I-bars, each chain essentially composed of 2 bars joined by pins. This design was inherently less redundant. If a single I-bar failed, the entire chain and potentially a large section of the bridge could be compromised. The crucial detail nobody talked about, or perhaps didn't fully grasp until it was too late, was the vulnerability of these unique I-bars to stress corrosion cracking. The bridge had been carrying a much heavier load of traffic than it was designed for decades. Years of exposure to the elements, de-icing salts, and constant vibration from vehicles had led to the insidious formation of microscopic cracks within the steel. Specifically, investigators would later pinpoint the failure to a single I-bar, identified as 203S in the north chain of the Ohio side superstructure. This one critical component had developed a tiny, almost invisible crack due to stress corrosion cracking, a process exacerbated by fatigue. On that fateful afternoon, under the weight of rush hour traffic, that tiny crack suddenly propagated, leading to a brittle fracture. The failure of that single I-bar initiated a catastrophic chain reaction, causing the adjacent I-bars to overload and fail sequentially, tearing the entire structure apart in mere seconds. It was a silent, invisible killer lurking within the steel, waiting for the precise moment to strike, revealing a deep, structural vulnerability that had been a ticking time bomb for years, hidden in plain sight. The engineering failure, however precise and scientific, translated into an unimaginable human toll. Among the 46 lives lost that day was Martha K. Miller, a vibrant 25-year-old schoolteacher. She was on her way to Christmas shopping in Ohio, a routine trip that Friday afternoon. Martha was known for her infectious laugh and her dedication to her third-grade students at Point Pleasant Elementary. She had a close-knit family, a fiancé, and a promising future. Her car, a bright blue 1967 Chevrolet, was one of the many vehicles that plunged into the icy depths of the Ohio River. Her family waited, hoping against hope, as dive teams battled the freezing currents and debris, but her body, like many others, was not recovered for days, and her car remained lost for weeks. Her absence left a void, not just in her family, but in the classroom, in the community, in every life she had touched. Each of the 46 names represented a story, a family, a future extinguished in an instant. There was Hilda Marie Stone, a 54-year-old mother of three, a passenger in a vehicle making the regular crossing. There was James Franklin Bailey, a 43-year-old father of five, whose morning shift was ending. The disaster ripped apart families, leaving behind widows, orphans, and parents mourning their lost children. The raw, guttural grief that swept through Point Pleasant was palpable, a collective wound that would take generations to even begin to heal. The collapse wasn't just a historical event, it was a deeply personal catastrophe for hundreds of people, leaving scars that defied any easy explanation or solace. This wasn't merely a statistic, it was the abrupt, brutal ending of countless narratives, each one a testament to the fragility of life and the devastating impact of structural failure. In the immediate aftermath of the Silver Bridge collapse, a frantic investigation began, not just into the mechanics of the failure, but into what, if anything, could have prevented it. What was truly hidden, denied, or never adequately explained centered not on deliberate malice, but on systemic oversight and the limitations of engineering knowledge at the time. The bridge's unique I-bar design, while innovative, had presented a specific challenge for inspection. The critical areas, particularly the connecting pins within the I-bar chains, were largely inaccessible without dismantling sections of the bridge. This made visual inspection for hairline cracks virtually impossible. Furthermore, the phenomenon of stress corrosion cracking, especially in the high-strength steels used in the Silver Bridge, was not fully understood in the 1960s. There was no established protocol for inspecting for such microscopic flaws. Who benefited from this silence? Not individuals, but rather the prevailing engineering practices and inspection standards that simply hadn't caught up to the advanced materials being used. The silence was not a deliberate cover-up of guilt, but rather the silence of ignorance, and ignorance of a critical vulnerability that lay dormant for decades. However, for the people of Point Pleasant, who had endured a year of terrifying Mothman encounters, the failure to identify and address these structural weaknesses felt like a betrayal. The unexplained phenomenon of the Mothman, for many, was a physical manifestation of this unseen, underlying dread, a harbinger of the disaster that the human system, with all its technical limitations, failed to prevent. This systemic lack of understanding and inspection capability meant that the bridge was a tragedy waiting to happen, unnoticed by human eyes, but perhaps perceived by something else entirely. In the aftermath of the collapse, a rigorous investigation was launched by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, an intensive effort to understand exactly what had happened and why. Expert metallurgists, structural engineers, and forensic analysts descended upon Point Pleasant. They meticulously recovered pieces of the shattered bridge, particularly the crucial I-bars, from the icy riverbed. What investigators found after painstaking examination was the definitive smoking gun, a small, almost undetectable crack in the lower plate of I-bar 330, located in the north chain of the Ohio Tower's suspension system. This fracture, caused by stress corrosion, had led to a catastrophic brittle failure. This particular type of steel, used in the Silver Bridge, was known to be susceptible to stress corrosion cracking when exposed to certain environmental conditions and subjected to sustained tensile stress, which the bridge experienced daily with its heavy traffic load. The NTSB report, published in 1971, concluded that the crack had likely been present for some time, slowly growing until it reached a critical size, at which point the I-bar failed instantaneously. This initiated a chain reaction, leading to the rapid failure of other connected I-bars and the complete disintegration of the bridge structure within seconds. The investigation was thorough, scientifically sound, and ultimately led to significant changes in bridge design, inspection, and maintenance protocols across the United States. It forced a reevaluation of how such structures were built, maintained, and how they aged under stress. Yet, despite the clear scientific explanation, for many in Point Pleasant, the official findings still didn't fully explain the palpable sense of dread, the unsettling premonitions, and the terrifying sightings that preceded the disaster by more than a year. The human mind seeks patterns, and in Point Pleasant, an invisible pattern of impending doom had been observed by eyes that saw beyond steel and concrete. The official explanation for the Silver Bridge collapse, while meticulously detailed and scientifically sound regarding the engineering failure, largely ignored the preceding 18 months of high strangeness in Point Pleasant. For the Mothman, the common dismissals offered were variations of misidentification or elaborate hoaxes. The most prominent false answer for the Mothman sightings was that witnesses had simply seen a large barn owl, specifically a barred owl or a great horned owl. Proponents of this theory pointed to the owl's large size, broad wingspan, and their nocturnal habits, suggesting that in the dark, under stress, and with limited visibility, a person could easily mistake an owl for something far more sinister. The glowing red eyes. Perhaps light reflecting off a bird's eyes, or simply an overactive imagination fueled by fear. Yet this explanation doesn't fully hold up against the sheer number and consistency of the sightings. Hundreds of people, including experienced hunters and birdwatchers, reported a creature that stood 6 to 7 feet tall, with a wingspan far exceeding any known bird, and with eyes that truly glowed with an internal, terrifying light. Some witnesses described the creature making no sound, even when flying directly overhead, which is uncharacteristic of large owls. Others described its gait on the ground as a clumsy shuffle, not the hopping or walking of a bird. The owl theory, while offering a rational alternative, requires an almost unprecedented level of collective misperception and hallucination that strains credulity when faced with the volume of detailed, consistent eyewitness testimony. It was a neat, tidy explanation, designed to dispel the unsettling supernatural elements, but it failed to account for the unnerving details that truly made the Mothman a phenomenon unto itself, leaving a lingering doubt about the full nature of the events. The most credible theory, one that attempts to reconcile both the scientific and the strange, posits that the Mothman was indeed a harbinger, a warning of the impending disaster, even if its true nature remains elusive. This doesn't necessarily mean the Mothman was a supernatural being with a direct, causal link to the bridge collapse. Instead, it suggests a profound, preternatural sensitivity to impending catastrophe. Perhaps the creature, whatever its biological or parapsychological origin, was drawn to areas of immense energetic instability, or places where great suffering was about to occur. It acted as an animal might, sensing a coming earthquake or tsunami, exhibiting distress or unusual behavior. John Keel, the influential paranormal researcher who extensively documented the Point Pleasant events in his book, The Mothman Prophecies, proposed that these entities, which he called ultraterrestrials, exist on a different vibrational plane and can manifest in our reality, often preceding disasters. He argued that the Mothman wasn't malevolent, but rather a warning, an anomaly that manifested because of the impending tragedy. The evidence actually points to a creature that appeared frequently around the TNT plant, an area that had seen numerous strange phenomena over the years, and specifically in the region of Point Pleasant for the 13 months prior to the collapse. The consistency of the sightings, the terror it inspired, and its uncanny departure from the area just before the bridge fell, all build a compelling, if circumstantial, case for its role as an omen. While the bridge's failure was undeniably a mechanical one, the Mothman saga remains a haunting testament to the possibility that some events cast long, strange shadows before them, shadows that some creatures, and perhaps some people, are uniquely tuned to perceive. The closest truth acknowledges the bridge's fatal flaw, but refuses to dismiss the unsettling synchronicity of the Mothman's appearance, suggesting a layer of reality we barely comprehend. The single most disturbing fact in the entire story, the chilling detail that truly binds the creature to the catastrophe, comes from the very moment of the Silver Bridge's collapse. Among the desperate, terrifying eyewitness accounts of that Friday afternoon, there were reports, hushed, often dismissed, but persistent, of a massive, dark, winged figure seen flying from the vicinity of the bridge just as it began to buckle. Some survivors claim to have seen it directly above the chaos, a grotesque silhouette against the twilight sky, not falling with the bridge, but escaping the scene, as if fleeing the very disaster it had seemingly foreshadowed. Imagine the horror. You're plunging into the icy depths, the world dissolving around you, and in that fleeting, final moment of lucidity, you glimpse the impossible, malevolent form that had haunted your town for over a year. now a silent spectator to the calamity it had perhaps tried to warn you about. This wasn't a sighting months before, nor a rumor recounted weeks later. This was a presence witnessed in the very instant of destruction by people whose lives were ending or irrevocably changed. It suggests not just a harbinger that appeared before the disaster, but a silent, omnipresent entity that was asterisked there for the climax, a witness to the profound human suffering, a dark angel departing the scene of its fulfilled prophecy. Whether an impossible coincidence, a shared hallucination brought on by extreme trauma, or something far more profound, the notion that the Mothman was not just a symbol of impending doom, but a direct participant in the tragedy's final, devastating moments, remains the most unsettling, inexplicable aspect of the entire Point Pleasant saga, etching its chilling presence into the very fabric of the disaster itself. The story of the Mothman and the Silver Bridge collapse remains a haunting paradox, a meticulously explained engineering failure intertwined with an utterly inexplicable series of paranormal events. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding, both of the physical world and of the mysterious forces that may lie just beyond our perception. Was the Mothman a real creature, an undiscovered species, a dimension-hopping entity, or a psychological phenomenon born from collective anxiety? Was it a guardian attempting to warn an oblivious town, or an omen, simply a manifestation of impending doom? The tragedy of the Silver Bridge was real, its human cost devastating, and its mechanical failure understood. But the shadow cast by the Mothman over Point Pleasant endures, a testament to the persistent human need to find meaning in chaos, to seek patterns in the unpatterned, and to acknowledge that sometimes the world reveals truths that defy all logic. This saga reminds us that history is not always a neat collection of facts. Sometimes it's a terrifying tapestry woven with threads of reality, folklore, and the chilling unknown, forcing us to question what we truly know about the nature of warnings, the fragility of life, and the strange, unseen things that might walk among us. If this kept you up at night, subscribe. We post dark history every week.